Hello, my name is Stefan. I'm one of the authors of Eddie and the Lizard Man, a book about a young man that is convinced his boss is a lizard man that is planning to abduct people from his small hometown of Linemell. And in just a few moments, I'm going to read the first chapter of this book to you, and we'll be reading more chapters in future videos. But as I read this story, I want you to be asking yourself this question. What is really going on here? Ask that question of everything in this book and everything in this series. Why? Because as you will soon discover in the curious world of Eddie Billings, things are rarely as they seem. And when things aren't as they seem, we need to ask why. The answer could be good, the answer could be bad, but if we aren't curious, we may never know. And knowing the truth about something in Eddie's world is really important as it is in the real world. So, are you curious to find out whether Eddie is just being paranoid or if the conspiracy is true? If you are, I want to invite you to come along with me as I read Book 1 in the Curious World of Eddie Billings book series, Eddie and the Lizard Man. Chapter 1, a particularly interesting find. In the center of the small town of Linemell, a place shrouded with its own curious secrets, crept a quaint road named Main Street. On one side of the street were family-owned shops and restaurants, and on the other side stood a towering old brick building that dated back to the time of the great pioneer Daniel Boone. In fact, one of the town's proudest moments was the night Daniel Boone slept in Minnie Ponder's spare bedroom in that very building. However, since then, the building had changed hands a number of times. Miss Ponder eventually sold the building to a businessman who turned it into a hardware store. Then that businessman's grandchildren, who inherited the building, sold it to another businessman that turned it into a mattress store. After a good run, that businessman retired, closed the store, and the space remained vacant for a number of years. That is, until another businessman, Kevin Kennedy, moved into the area and opened up an antique shop in the tired old building, an antique shop called Kennedy Antiques. Now, if you've never been in one, there is something wonderfully mysterious about an antique shop. They are filled with fascinating items like old dressers with secret compartments and shelves stacked with leather-bound books and clocks and vases. It's the perfect kind of place for a bird lover to find an 1879 carving of a cardinal, or the perfect kind of place for a cartographer to find a hand-drawn map of the Pigeon River. But even more than that, it was the perfect kind of place for someone like Eddie Billings to take a part-time job. Or at least that's what he thought when he took the job. But who is Eddie Billings? Well, one could say Eddie was an awkward sort of guy of average height with light brown hair and inquisitive blue eyes, that he usually dressed in mismatched clothes found at a thrift store, or that he didn't have many friends or get out enough. And all of those things might be true. However, the most important things to know about Eddie Billings are that he was an overly curious conspiracy theorist, junk food enthusiast, tinkerer, and, in this particular moment, a disinterested antique store clerk who was dusting off a porcelain angel figurine when his eyes caught a clock sitting on top of an old bookcase. It read 2:50 p.m. He thought to himself, "Only 10 more minutes. Only 10 more minutes and my shift is over. If I'm lucky, maybe today's shift will be a good one." Now, Eddie's shift began at 1 p.m. and ended at 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. His main responsibilities were to assist customers, arrange inventory, and keep the place clean, which was what he was occupied with at the moment. Well, that and counting down the minutes to 3 p.m. You see, Eddie didn't mind arranging inventory or keeping things clean. He could do that all day long and be quite content. It was assisting customers that made Eddie anxious. That's why a good shift to Eddie was a shift that didn't involve assisting customers or even seeing a customer. So far, today's shift had been a good one. So with only 10 minutes left on the clock, Eddie remained pessimistically optimistic that this shift could actually end up being one of those rare and cherished good ones. As Eddie continued cleaning various items arranged on various countertops, shelves, and display cases, he heard a faint dissonant whirring sound coming from the back of the dimly lit antique store. Intrigued, he slowly peeked his head around the corner of a large wooden dresser. He looked toward the dark hall that led to the back office where his boss, Kevin, worked. As Eddie peered down the ominous hall, suspicion surrounding the strange noise began to fill his mind. What's that? A fan? No, it can't be. The pitch changes too much. A radio? No, there's not any static. Maybe it's some kind of communication device. Then Eddie had an epiphany. Like an alien communication device. Now granted, An alien communication device isn't the kind of thing to jump into most people's minds. But then Eddie isn't like most people. Remember, he's an overly curious conspiracy theorist, and overly curious conspiracy theorists are very good at coming up with creative explanations for things that seem out of place. So, with the misplaced noise ringing in his ears, Eddie resumed his dusting and speculating. Could that actually be an alien communication device? And if so, why is it in Kevin's office? Looking for the next item to clean, Eddie saw a remarkably filthy old milk bottle sitting on the lower shelf of the bookcase. He crouched down to grab it. As he did, he thought to himself, I just don't get it. An old milk bottle being sold for $18. Who in their right mind buys an old... Eddie's thoughts were interrupted when he saw something very peculiar, yet lately increasingly more familiar. Another one, he said under his breath. There, lying behind the milk bottle, was a snake-like shedding of skin. The reason Eddie said another one was because in the past week alone he'd found 10 such skins. But the truly interesting part was that in the 4 years he'd worked at the store, he'd never once seen a snake. This caused Eddie to wonder whether they actually belonged to snakes at all. Whoa, that's a big one. Eddie held it up for inspection, then proceeded to carefully place it in his shirt pocket. From the same pocket, he removed a notepad and pen, items that never left his person. On the cover of the notebook were the words, "My particularly interesting findings." Looking down at his wristwatch, he read the time, 2:53 p.m. He found a blank page in his notepad and jotted down the time, date, and location where he found the skin. He also added a note about the strange whirring noise coming from the back office. As he was writing, a loud bell rang out, startling him. It was the front doorbell, and to Eddie's dismay, someone had arrived. So, we've got some important clues to pay attention to. Clue number 1 is the strange whirring noises coming from Kevin's office. Number 2, we've got the snake-like skin sheddings, but no snakes. Let me know what you think those clues mean, or if you noticed any other important details by commenting below. Remember, you can get your own copy of Eddie and the Lizard Man by clicking the link in the description box below. Thank you so much for joining me and watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe, and join me in the next video as we continue our reading of Eddie and the Lizard Man in Chapter 2, The Nail in the Coffin. See you soon.